All right, everybody, welcome on into this segment today. And I am the host of the One True Calling channel. And today I've got an amazing guest, Melissa Johnston. She's an abundance and intuition coach, and she works with high impact individuals, people who are really ready to break free from hidden blocks and patterns and the glass ceilings that sometimes make people not achieve at their highest level. And Melissa, she has a very unique approach to this. She has the ability to access the soul book of records combined with a very deep level of marketing and business coaching experience. And so she's just able to work with people at a really high level, both business wise, but also at that deep intuitive and spiritual wise. She's the founder of the Destiny Alignment Blueprint. She has the Freedom First Frequency and Energy Yes method that provides frameworks to help you to decode your soul purpose and to clear those subconscious blocks and to rewire your mind to align with your full fuck yes lifestyle. I love that. Let me go ahead and bring Melissa onto the stage here. Hey, Melissa, how you doing today?
Hello, Gio. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I am just wonderful.
Yeah, so good to see you. Where are you joining us here from today?
So I'm calling in from Ottawa, Ontario. It's the capital of Canada, or the capital of Canada.
Okay, awesome. Well, I want to start off, Melissa, by providing some context for people who don't know you. And we're going to dive into discussing your work as an intuitive coach for high impact individuals. But first, let's talk a little bit about what you were doing before you became an intuitive coach and what caused you to pivot away from that type of career into what you do now.
Sure. So, believe it or not, prior to my spiritual awakening, I was actually employed at one of the world's top offshore corporate law firms. And I was essentially helping to funnel and have tax breaks, right, for the 1% through offshore entities and incorporations. So very, very different than the spiritual world, very much white collar. But I also have 10 plus years of marketing experience as well.
I'm curious about what caused you to switch away from that world into the work that you do now. Was there like a specific trigger or one day when you just said, hey, I just can't take this anymore? What was that like?
Yeah, so it's funny because as you're climbing, the corporate ladder, and you're very, you're very ambitious, right? In your early on career, you're making all the right moves, staying, putting in extra time, right? Doing all the right things to build this like quote unquote successful life. And what I noticed, and it got louder and louder to the point where I really couldn't ignore, was that despite all of these achievements, accomplishments, despite looking everything, picture perfect on the outside, there was this nagging void that was getting louder and hungrier, and it was just this deep sense of unfulfillment. And I did remember like walking back to my job in the middle of a lunch break, wondering like, am I really unhappy? Like this is, I always thought that was something for like, these miserable people. And when I had that, it was a pretty big pill to swallow. 6 months later, I essentially, I got down on my hands and knees for the first time. I prayed to, I wasn't really spiritual or religious or anything, but I kind of prayed, right? And I just said, hey, like, look, if this isn't working, if this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, can you please just show me the way? And within 6 months, I had a rapid spiritual awakening, left behind my marriage, which was also very unhealthy at the time, family home. I got laid off at my my board level position, and everything started to crumble. But the funny thing is, it was too much to call like a coincidence, right? So there was this part of me that was like, something is happening at such a rapid rate. Like, this is not anything to worry about. This is something to lean into. And that's when I first got my very first clairvoyant vision. And it was my spirit guide showing me this sort of Staples like easy button. And the message was, this is your easy reset. Like, this is your one chance to completely reinvent yourself from the inside out and to fix everything that's not working.
It sounds like there's a lot of story behind that story. I'm curious, did you have a guide or somebody that came into your life that helped you on that journey? I mean, listening to that moment where you got down on your knees, but you didn't have like a spiritual orientation. Like how did that come about where the door opened to that spiritual side of yourself?
it was this moment where I started to comprehend that there was a greater picture at play. And this was actually many years before I started, investing in myself, investing in coaching, mentorship, all those amazing things, right? This was actually 100% self-led, but there was this really strong sort of premonition that if I just follow the breadcrumbs and just go through the different what I call gateways of expansion, that's where more would be presented to me, right? Or more that I would learn. But I remember this very distinct moment of being on the very first bed of like an energy practitioner, and she was working some like Reiki or something to release some trauma. And the second she said the words Akashic Records, I've never heard those words in my life before, but there was something that got triggered or activated with me. Like it was like this light switch or fuse that just ignited something. And I remember laying on the bed, and again, I wasn't even spiritual, but I was like, Akashic Records, okay, I need to find out every single thing about what that is. And that's where it sort of all began to study and to deepen, through that sort of that self-actualization and that unraveling process.
Wow, I love doing these interviews because what I've discovered and what I find, and it confirms again speaking to you, is that everybody's journey is a little bit different.
Totally, totally. And sometimes we tend to try to replicate other people's trajectory, right? Or we look at maybe what their path was and try to fit us in, but we're really so, in our own timing, but also in our own sort of synchronistic way of being guided towards what we're actually destined and meant to do.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a pretty strong destiny. Like it somehow, like almost like a lightning bolt. It sounds like.
It was the way I can describe it was like giving a baby a remote control with no training or anything, and stuff started coming online, and I would take naps in the afternoon and I would see this sort of like shamanic figure telling me you have a lot of angels around you, and things were like it almost was too much to comprehend. So that's when I started deep diving into the modalities, because again, having that sort of like lightning going through you, you need stuff to ground it in, right? Or else you could really lose your mind when it comes to all these new, things coming unlocked.
Yeah, I've actually heard about that. Actually, people
Mhm.
speak about this. In fact, even there's quite a conversation amongst intuitives and shamans and different things like this, where
Mhm.
people are voicing a lot around what you just said, which is people may have an awakening, but then they have nobody like really qualified to guide them to ground it. How do you relate to that? Did you find somebody to ground it, or did you just find your way on onto yourself?
Yeah, it's a really common theme in the spiritual communities, and it also comes with what I call a lot of sort of like false consciousness overlays or spiritual matrix traps. Whereas when we don't have that sort of neutral, or well structured training to ground that all in, or somebody experienced to kind of relay those experiences through, we can get stuck on the never ending healing belt, for example. We can also get stuck in the sort of spiritual escapism path, right? And these are these like very, very subtle reversal matrices where it's a whole lot of good sort of given to you with like a little bit of false, right? And the further you go, the more distorted it gets. So I'm a huge advocate of mentorship, investing in yourself, and also asking or muscle testing, if you're familiar with that, to understand, okay, can this coach be the right bridge for me? Can this coach get me from A to B, right? Like sort of using your own body's intelligence to tell you the right people to pair with.
Yeah, it reminds me of a pretty close friend of mine. I have a little side project where I record people's transformational journeys and kind of hero stories. And this one person who shared a story, she had an awakening at a Joe Dispenza event. Those are
Mhm.
very powerful awakening, activations that he does with that whole group of people. And this is not to say anything bad about Joe Dispenza. My friend, she had an awakening, but then that awakening kind of led into what you might call a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
In fact, you would call a mental health crisis. And so she she was in such a crisis that she needed to reach out. It was a full blown mental health crisis. So
Mhm.
she went to mental health resources, and long story short, she finally found her way to a center that was able to help her. I'm curious if you've ever spoke to other people that have had that kind of experience, because it sounded quite frightening listening to to her story.
Yeah, it is much more common than we think, right? And of course that comes with a lot of stigma because the first, instinct from, modern medicine and stuff is to sort of diagnose it as psychosis or whatever else, right? When it's not necessarily always meant to be permanent or a fault of your own. It's when our bodies are not equipped to hold that much light or that much consciousness. It's like flipping a light switch on a dormant building on and expecting, the fuses to go without overloading the system. I've heard that as well. So my mom is a huge fan of Dr. Joe. I personally love the meditations, do that a lot. I can't vouch for his retreats, but I've heard the same thing specifically on him because it does accelerate people to a frequency or a level of consciousness that they have not been trained to be able to integrate, for lack of a better word. So I have personally experienced that for about a 2-month period during COVID, where I was experimenting with psychedelics in healing, and that also led to a acceleration that was just way too much and too fast. And that's also something that I've personally experienced. So I have a lot of compassion for it, but it is something that really requires that community to bridge.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we're bringing the topic up because, yeah, my friend that went through this experience, she reached out to the resources that she thought, and it was exactly as you described. It was the mental health resources, and so they actually wanted to commit her into a mental institution,
Mhm.
for like a mental hold, which was totally inappropriate. And fortunately, she had a good family. But again, not so much about my friend, but I just bring some light to this conversation because it would seem to me that other people may have similar experiences and not have resources, and maybe you would be a resource around those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be an absolute pleasure to be. And what I'll say is why that matters so much, whether it is, accelerating your gifts, things coming online, or even following your purpose, is when we're charting down uncharted territory, for lack of better words, like the road less traveled, right? The path that we are being asked to go on. We're not recreating it based on the known, what is familiar, what is our comfort zone, or what is even predictable. We are really collapsing space and time to quantum leap into these aspects of ourselves that would never be available through, say, following the steady 9 to 5 corporate path, right? Or any other trajectory that is sort of linear. So doing it ourselves is entirely possible, but how much time are we sort of spending in crisis or in confusion or doubt or just in blind spots because we don't have somebody that's a little bit more experienced or just a little bit further away down the road that can help us to save years by sort of relaying the shortcuts, right? Or pointing out the illusions along the way to help us get on a clear and accurate path.
It makes me grateful for my own journey because my own personal journey has been very different than that. Like I had a very slow journey. Like I
Mhm.
was introduced to these tools and awakening when I was like 13,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's been a lifelong slow journey. And so it hasn't been, I've had some moments that have been more extreme, but anyways, I just say that because, like I said, everybody's journey is a little bit different, and I think it's very, useful to know about guides like yourself that can really guide people through. Tell me a little bit about the work that you do, and what is the center of the work that you do. It's an interesting combination of kind of business guidance, but this kind of awakening guidance. So tell me, what's the center of the center, and what do those tools look like?
Thank you. Yeah, the bread and butter of what I do is essentially um, clearing out this preconceived belief that we can either have our comfortable, secure, stable life, right, where we have the nice like luxury, the material goods, our physical needs are met, or we have this wildest dream of our life, but it feels super unrealistic. It feels irresponsible, or sort of um, like once in a moment, chance that sort of arrives once we've figured out the rest of life. And what I do best is help people to connect their dots on their highest fulfillment, their most exciting thing that if time, money, existing responsibilities, and commitments were to thing, that's what they ultimately would be doing. And then to reverse engineer a plan from their higher self or their infinite self, which has access to all potential choices, the slow route, the fast route, the fun route, right? The route, you can balance it while doing your existing 9 to 5, transitioning gradually, like all of those different options. And then to clear all of the fears, the resistance, any upper limits or any subconscious blocks to actually taking massive inspired aligned action. Because what I've noticed in the spiritual communities is there's a lot of programs that give people clarity on their purpose, their mission, right? But then they don't always have the tools to actually go after it. And that's when they get stuck in self-sabotage or knowing this, but also not having the resources or financial, outlook to actually build a life that reflects that.
Oh, that leads so perfectly into the next thought that's in my thinking right now, which is like I have been, given the gift of having grown up in an entrepreneurial family. And
Mhm.
like I said, my journey towards awakening has been a slow journey. I've had moments of transition and pivoting from similar to what you said, at least, things that job. I had one job in my life. One
Wow.
yeah, I pretty much worked myself my entire life. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, pretty big family. We're all self-employed. And so for me, like, I don't really know that much about the corporate world. I don't really know that much about secure jobs. I know about, being secure within my own inner resources. But for people who maybe have also come from positions like yours, maybe corporate positions or places where, they have a lot of financial security, and maybe they have this aha moment where they're like, I feel like this is not right for me. What would you advise to them? What would you say to people like that, particularly, like I said, like in regards to people who have, responsibilities, let's say family responsibilities and things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. And oh my gosh, what a gift, right? To be able to grow up the way that you did, to be surrounded by parents or, sort of role models that were already in business, right? Where you kind of were able to normalize that. I think that that must have been such a gift. And yeah, many people would love to have that. For the people that have the sort of traditional conditioning, right? That the 9 to 5 is the safe route. You need to save for retirement and you need to follow the thing that's let out in front of you. What I would say is that, again, we all have an infinite self, right? We can call it your higher self, your God self, whatever you want to call it. But this infinite self knows all past, present, future timelines, and you don't need to be psychic to tap into it. If you even take a second to connect while you're listening in, you can just bring in a ton of light, connect to source light, and then just ask your infinite self. So, hey, I've got this dream, right? And if I were to actually go for it and to just follow my step-by-step guidance, so every day I just do a quick check-in. Hey, what is one small action step I can take, right? How long would it actually take me to transition from A to where I actually want to be? And the answers might be surprising because we sometimes make it this like very long, far out thing just because we've put a lot of value on it. But it doesn't actually need to mean that it's complicated or hard or unrealistic to go after. Um, and once you have that sort of awareness, right, you can start to commit yourself to just putting that out there and allowing the resources, the people, the places, things to follow through what we call a universal ask. And a universal ask or a cosmic order is basically reverse engineering something you'd like from the universe, whether it is landing a client or a great deal on something, just using open-ended questions to say, hey, what would it take and how would I feel if this thing arrived? So anytime you get stuck, you could just ask for your next step.
I love that. And I can actually relate to that. And I wish I had that guidance at one point in time, because I had built a company with a little over $12 million in sales. And I made a transition into this online teaching and training world back in 2008, before it was really much of a world at all. And if I had that little prompting, like how long, how long would this take? It
Mhm.
probably would have made that road a lot easier for me, because it took longer than I expected it to take. And mostly, I would say, because I didn't seek out coaching.
Mhm.
And so listening to what you're saying just resonates with me, because whether you, find that inner guidance yourself, or you find a coach like yourself that can help open up that guidance. Like, I'm a pretty intuitive person,
Mhm.
but yeah, I didn't have that prompting, and there's a nuance that I hear it and I feel it, as you say, like asking that question, how long is this going to take? And for me, it took about 3 years. So I had actually a fair amount of savings, but I could have done things that would have made the journey a lot easier. I think if I had asked that intuitive question. And everybody's journey is their own, and I've got some great stories as a result of that. But
Mhm.
it certainly could have been a lot easier.
Yeah, I think we're in this moment of time, right, where it really is that sort of like wisdom or information economy, right? And sometimes we have these fears of investing in ourselves, or we're just not familiar with what it's like to hire a coach or join a mastermind. But the reality is, all of that is basically just a condensed amount of information into a short amount of time of every pitfall to possibly avoid the things that you can only go through trial and error, right? And then the learnings or the downloads that you get on how to like sort of accelerate that from somebody who's walked the path and come out, like in really good shape.
Yes, absolutely. And I like the way that you say that. It's like condensed knowledge when you either join a mastermind or have a coach or a mentor, because yeah, that made all the difference in the world. And that's actually what I say to people now too, just from having had gone through some challenges that not everybody needs to go through. There's shortcuts to that. Well, I'm curious to ask you a little bit about what are some of the common mindset barriers or energy barriers that you find that keep people, that hold people back, that you help them to remove.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And what I will say is, I actually have a perfect resource for this. I've reverse engineered the 10 most common pitfalls and sort of invisible barriers or thresholds that every successful entrepreneur or purpose driven individual will need to cross in order to actually access or step into their destiny. And that's where usually at each stage, most people will, get caught up or frazzled or triggered, and then they'll go back to the known, right? Their backup plan. The most common ones, and I've experienced this so much too, is in those early stages of realizing that you're here for more and getting the glimpses or the ideas or the inspiration to put something out there. When you're first in the sort of experimentation or like seeding a dream stage, if you have any levels of self doubt about this, the universe will mirror this back to you through people doubting that you can go for it, right? And a lot of the times we look to other people for external validation or to confirm, like, yes, that's a great idea, go for it. But if you haven't reconciled that within yourself, all of that self doubt, all of that, I'm not sure if I'm meant for this, then of course we're going to be a vibrational match to people who are like, yeah, that sounds like a terrible idea, right? Or I don't know, maybe you should just stay for the next bonus or whatever at the quarter three, right? So that's where that sort of 100% self trust will need to come from. The other part is that income thing and feeling like it's impossible to replace your current income because you're still operating from sort of an employee mindset, which equates a linear amount of time in exchange for a certain dollar, whether it's hourly, monthly, annual salary. Sometimes we are conditioned to believe that our time is worth a dollar amount rather than seeing the transformation we can offer people, which shouldn't be linear at all. It should be that sort of quantum level that bypasses, logical amounts of time.
Yeah, that's a perfect opener into just share a little bit about my own experience, because it was a bit challenging, and it was to your point, not a linear experience. And in one moment, I was completely out of financial resources, such to the point that my utilities got turned off. And I did the only thing that I knew how to do while I was getting ready to do a webinar out to a pretty large audience. I had a pretty large audience for this program offering that I was doing. My utilities were shut off, and I did the only thing I could think to do, which is to ask my neighbor if I could run an extension cord over to their house. And I did that webinar, and I ended up finding an investor from that webinar. And within 30 days, she had deposited $30,000 into a joint bank account and opened up the doorway to corporate clients for the field where I was serving at the time. And so I had to share that, because what you're saying is rings true with what my experience is. And even getting clients, ideally the best thing is to use logic, right, to a certain point. And I
Totally.
want to ask you a little bit about that. To build a foundation where you do have, money in the bank and a reliable way of getting clients and things like this. But tell me a little bit about that, like how you relate to this world or this connection between the intuitive side and the logical side.
Yeah, and wow, that's so incredible too. And just recapping what you had shared about your own personal journey, it sounds like that was sort of that final showdown or that test of faith, right? In a normal setting, most people might have been like, oh, power's off. Okay, this is definitely not meant to happen. But how incredible that you leaned into it and did what was necessary to just take it one small step further before the big breakthrough, right? So all of those things can for sure be mapped. And when you know what the test of faith or the leap of faith that's required at each stage is, then it makes it that much easier to just cross it because it's a predictable obstacle that you can kind of circumvent or just master. The logic and the intuition, they go hand in hand, right? And I think that there's this big disconnect between sort of like the science-based world, the logical people, the more grounded traditional folks, and then the intuitive, free-flowing, channeling guidance. And what I'll say is intuition processes, information at a speed that your logical mind cannot comprehend. But the more information we have, the more accurate our intuition is, because of course we're able to collect and filter through the entire resonance field of the data rather than just going on one puzzle piece alone. So I'm very much a big believer in the times where we need to make an intuitive decision without looking too much in the details. And that's usually something that requires us to test ourselves because our ego might have an investment in the outcome because we're afraid to get it wrong. But for all the other times, intuition actually serves best if we already know all the data. We've done our due diligence, we've pulled the numbers, and then at the end, we tune into, say, our body's intelligence, right? Or that higher intelligence to see or to read between the lines of what is typically unknowable to make the best possible choice. And it might tell you things that you'll only see once you've actually decided to follow through and trust it, and then get the hindsight of that's why, I was getting that guidance.
I love that, and I totally relate to that because that does resonate very closely with how I operate now. And I operate more so, I would say, from a logical side.
Mhm,
I have a very strong background in planning and designing, so systems engineering.
mhm.
But yeah, now I combine that. I would say I'm somewhere between 60 40, 60 logical, but 40. And when it really comes down to where the rubber meets the road, like, oh, I'm not really sure what to do, tuning into the guidance is where I go to.
I love that.
Well,
And it's a dance for sure, right? And I've noticed some things too on the opposite side where over the weekend I was just reading $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. And so far in launching this recent program that I've been working on, I've been tapping into my guidance. Okay, what's my next step? What's my next step? And it's funny to sometimes see the correlation too, because everything that I was sort of downloading or getting guided to do matched up to his specific strategies in there, which I up until this moment didn't know about. But when they match up, I'm like, okay, there's something bigger here, right? That sort of is that thing that only, higher wisdom can comprehend.
well, let's talk a little bit about the ideal type of clients that you work with, and how do you work with people now? Do you work mostly one on one in groups, and then who are those ideal clients for you?
It's a great question. So I love to help high achieving, spiritually aware men and women all around the world that are, heart centered, they're purpose driven. They have typically some sort of creative genius to them, but they're also not afraid to make big leaps, big strides, right? Or to take something and to run with it, right? So they are action takers. They are sort of self-led, and they're really looking to up their confidence level through working with the subconscious. Typically, there's three ways to work with me. It would be a one-on-one setting, and I do that in my private VIP coaching for destiny alignment or for abundance. And I've recently also just started group accelerator for abundance, where I'm teaching the exact framework that I use to go from occasional, like $150 healing clients to, sold out premium clients. And that's actually going to be launching on the 13th. So that is more of a 6-week intensive option.
I love that. So both one-on-one and group program experiences are available. Great. Well, the last thing I want to ask about the type of clients is there something else that's unique about those type of individuals? Like, is it an income level? Is it a certain kind of person that is drawn to work with you, or that makes that right match? What is it that makes the perfect match for both the client and you to come together to create magic?
I typically tend to have the highest amount of synergy in like creation, like co-creation magic with high achievers who may have also been sort of the black sheep or outcast in their family because it just didn't fit in. Like they didn't fit into the status quo. They were the rule breakers. They were the ones that like questioned. They did it with so much heart. Like I'm not talking about a rebel just for the sake of it, but the ones who are a little bit more challenging because they weren't willing to accept the sort of traditional path or family norms. And a lot of the times that also comes with some family line trauma, right? Or early on trauma, whether it is narcissistic relationships, near-death experiences, those types of things. In terms of the lifestyle, so yes, I love people who are high performers, either in a corporate job. They've had a great amount of success, but they're really looking for that next level in terms of their personal fulfillment, and they would like the both. Or people who are fairly new to entrepreneurship, and they are either new practitioners, new business owners, or existing ones that are really just looking to scale their business to that next level of being like a freedom-based business and working with premium clients.
I love hearing about that. I'm so curious. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and so I'm kind of surrounded by a lot of high achievers. A lot of people in all kinds of different industries. They seem to galvanize here. Sports people and business people. It's quite a mix of people. So it really resonates. I see these people that you're talking about, and they are really different. They are really different. Like there's a store that I went into the other day that sells these used luxury bags. I'm not really super familiar with this luxury bag market. I know the prices are really quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And anyways, the people that were selling them were some young folks, and these are like $1,200, $1,500 used bags, and they're selling them on Whatnot, which I had never even heard of before. It's like a QVC, new application where you can have your own live QVC type of show. But I mention it because, an outside observer who did not have the kind of understanding of what, makes a high achiever, or what makes, the ingredients that makes it, might be like, oh, it's just some kid that's just doing something, like, I don't even know what they're doing.
Totally resonate, and that's the thing about abundance, right? It's like omnipresent. It's ever there. There's kids being paid $6 million per year to open toys on YouTube, right? And to review them.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
It doesn't have to make sense, and it really doesn't need to be this thing where we're like bartering and it's this hard game to play. Like if you allow it and you believe it's possible and you clear up those parts of your subconscious that might resist it coming easily or might resist it if it's too fun, then we can actually open up to the frequency where all of that is possible, and you see it more and more because you become a match to it. So it's the living proof, right?
Yes. Well, I'm glad I mentioned that because, yeah, that totally resonates. In the family that I grew up in, one of the challenges that I had to overcome, again, we all have our own journey,
Mhm.
and we were small scale entrepreneurs, small scale local business, which I loved it. And I really value family owned business. And yet there's this new world that's opening up that you just described pretty well, like 13-year-old kids getting paid millions of dollars to unbox materials, or even I've seen low ticket programs, like
Mhm.
a program. Sometimes we think about these high ticket programs, and that does give me some sense of awe. But sometimes I've seen now these low ticket group programs for like $147, but they'll have like 500 people in there. and
Mhm.
it's like, generating like, $60,000 a month, and the person is, spending about an hour and a half a week, facilitating those programs. So it's all about possibility, isn't it?
It's about possibility, and it's about remembering that if it hasn't been done in your family line, or if it hasn't been modeled to you and you're feeling that nudge, it might actually be that you, on a soul level, are sort of courted and contracted. Like you have a soul contract to be the one that walks the path first, right? Or to do it first for the people before you.
Well, Melissa, as we wrap things up, I want to ask you, what is the next level ceiling for yourself, or what's the next vision that you're creating for yourself right now?
My current passion project is the Freedom First Frequency. This is the spiritual and sovereign abundance accelerator for people who have a spiritual business or would like to transition from their 9 to 5 into a purpose-driven lifestyle. And with the economy coming up and the recession, all this sort of fanatical stuff that's happening on the news right now, I'm really being called and guided to help activate those people who are ready to serve on a bigger level and to be able to make a global impact or local impact, whatever their unique mission is, by helping them to call in dream clients on demand and to sell with so much heart and soul, and to really market and package their unique genius or their unique medicine in a way that resonates with the people that they're meant to help.
I love that. I love that you mentioned it made just the teeniest little inference to like the perceived economic time that we're in right now. Because I will share that the time when I launched my media company was in 2008,
Mhm.
and it was the depth of the Great Recession,
Yep.
and many people around me were really struggling. It was fairly quick for me to find success with online teaching and training and content marketing, and people were still like struggling. And it's not just me, because I know also it's been said many times before that in so-called recessions that or depressions, that is often the time when millionaires are made.
It is, yeah, it's statistics, and I've seen that as well too. And I think we all have a choice at the end of the day. It's, do we want to be a consumer or a creator, right? And with things that we cannot control, like we can manifest, we can pray, we can visualize a happier, abundant world, and of course we do this. But with things that we truly cannot control, alone, all we can control is our actions, right? And so we can tune into the programming, the media, the TV, and the stuff going on, and we can get consumed by it, or we can choose to step into our own frequency of just using our genius, being like adding value to the world, right? And almost making it impossible to sink, because you are setting yourself up for, again, non-linear remuneration or currency, or just being provided through offering your gifts to the world for people who need it during those times.
Well, Melissa, I'm going to wrap things up here, and I'm going to make sure that our audience has a best link to find you and to connect with you. And I just want to appreciate you so much for coming on, because you and I are so aligned with what we're doing. It's a little bit different, but so
Totally.
aligned. So appreciate speaking to you today.
Thank you, Gio. It's such a pleasure to come on. And yes, of course, it's always such an honor to be able to collaborate with like-minded individuals. Love what you're doing, and it was great to just be here and to share space with you.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.